We now find ourselves telling stories at a very interesting time in history. And as John was talking a little bit about technology, we really are now in the connected digital world. And as such, we need to start to think about how this remote control works. And I want to talk to you a little bit about something called transmedia, right? And I kind of hate catchphrases and words like that, but it does kind of capture what we're faced with right now. Transmedia is a term that was coined by a guy, Professor Henry Jenkins at the USC Annenberg School of Business. And the idea was originally coined in his book, Convergence Culture, right? And it's really, in a nutshell, the notion of telling stories in a consistent manner across a whole host of media platforms. And the idea is to consistently develop characters, worlds, backstory, mythology, and then things that tie those characters and things together in a context which is vehicles and architecture and terrain and things like weapons and the stuff that they have. And so the notion is now, as we approach as storytellers the digitally connected world, we now are faced with a very interesting scenario as well, which is this crazy thing of a managed digital content ecosystem. Well, what is that? It is the reality of the entertainment industry today. And when I say entertainment, it includes games on consoles, games on your mobile devices, on your pads and your pods and your tablets. It also addresses things like video on demand, the immediacy of content, when you want it, where you want it, and on what screen you want it, and whether you want to interact with it and engage with it, or you want to sit back and be entertained by it. But these are the realities that storytellers are faced with. And so the notion of creating material and content for a single screen is quickly becoming obsolete, right? Now, it's not to say that the stories are obsolete, but from a business perspective, the notion of a single opportunity is less than desirable today. And a lot of it has to do with the cost of making compelling content, right? So the notion is now to be able to scale mass audiences around the planet, large-scale audiences, by communicating to them across different platforms, a film, a game, an experience. At any place that they come in contact with their technology or device of choice, there's an opportunity for them to enter a greater story world. These all become on-ramps into a greater whole. So, how did we at Digital Domain deal with this? Well, look, I'd like to tell you we were brilliant, and we envisioned this in the future, and saw into the future, and we had a master plan, and we came up with something very spectacular and amazing and innovative. But like so many things with innovation and creativity, you play the hand you are dealt, right? So often it really is, what is the old adage, you make lemonade from lemons. You're in a situation and you really find yourself needing to move out of your comfort zone and address the realities and the facts, for better or for worse, that you find yourself in. So today I'm going to kind of illustrate that point just in talking about a film that we finished last year called Tron Legacy. And because we only have a short time together today, I'm really going to just focus on the beginning, which is the development process of making this, willing this film and this connected world of Tron into existence. How did that happen? What's that process of getting a film and a property like this off the ground and made, right? And it's not necessarily what you may think. So I'll start with a brief history of Tron. So originally the film was made in 1982, and of course I remember when I was a kid when it came out, I was like, oh my God, it was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. Interesting factoid also about Tron. Later that year, when it was nominated originally for an Academy Award, Tron was disqualified from the Academy Awards because at that time it was believed that using computers was cheating, right? Not many people know that. It was disqualified because they used computers to make the film. But we began in probably late 2007 starting to talk about the future and having to address the fact that these crazy pads and pods and tablets and the speed of content available wirelessly and on the internet was something we couldn't ignore, right? Well, along about that time, we began to work with a young director that we'd been making TV commercials with, and a guy named Joe Kaczynski. And Joe was trying to get his first film made, and he's kind of one of us. He's a digital artist designer by trade, or by training, and he's now like a rock star commercial director, and he loved the first film, Tron. And we partnered with a young film producer named Sean Bailey, who also was at the beginning of his film producing career. And so with Joe and with Sean, working with their team of artists kind of in the commercial space at Digital Domain, everybody got behind this idea of making Tron. Well, something happened. Right around then, we had a strike. Now, in November of 2007, it was the Writers Guild of America went on strike. What that means is that the input of content into the pipeline of Hollywood stopped. There are no original stories that can be developed into films, or really television at that time, to be made into to films and TV shows after that. And so that really threw us a curveball, because just as this team, Joe and Sean, got involved in trying to will the film, a remake or a reboot of the Tron film into existence, everything stopped. There's no writers. Well, in our world, everything starts with story, right? And you've heard a lot of that today. It all starts with story. Well, we couldn't do that. We couldn't do that yet. So we decided to take a completely different approach. And this is the playing the hand you're dealt, or making lemonade from lemons. We were faced with, do we give up, or do we try something crazy and radical? So the notion was, we can still continue to develop the notion of making Tron, but instead, let's now focus on a visual development process whereby we could potentially take something so compelling to the studio, the financiers, that in a way we could validate the need to make, or the business perspective of making Tron. We could validate the need to make Tron, and validate that Joe Kosinski, this young director who's never made a movie before, is the right guy, by showing them something so compelling that they wouldn't need to read or even have imagination. They could just see it, right? So that was the idea. And that beyond that, this approach to development would yield something that would have a powerful residual effect on the studio and the filmmaking community. So I'm going to show you something, and then after it's done playing, we can talk about it. So we might want to kill these lights up here, and again, I think we're only on one screen. So, does anybody know what that is? Has anybody seen that piece before? So a lot of people, when they see this, they believe this is a trailer for the film, that this was basically footage taken from the movie and used to market the film. Well, in fact, it wasn't. This is a prototype. So this is the visual development test. This is the piece that we created that got the movie greenlit, that got the whole franchise greenlit and financed to build now an entire managed digital content ecosystem to create product across all the different platforms. Now, what's interesting about creating a prototype, again, is that it's a very visceral, tangible sample of what a film is going to look like. And in many cases, what we learned in going through this process was we watched executives at a studio respond to this in a way that we'd never seen before. We watched entire departments of the studio respond to this in a way that you just don't respond from reading words on a page. Now, that's not to dismiss or diminish the value of the script, because it's essential, it's critical, it's everything. But the response, the emotional response, the wow factor of people watching this prototype for the first time was palpable, right? You could see people in the room going, oh my God, can I see that again? Wait, we got to show so-and-so. And this happened time and time and time again. And so we started to realize, wow, we may have something here. Now again, the writers are still on strike, so we can't really develop narrative yet. We still can't develop the 3-act story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So that's elusive, but now we know that we have a studio and departments from that studio that are behind this saying, we want it, give us a great story. Which is interesting because a lot of films don't have the benefit of going through that process, right? It's trying to sell words on a page, which is really difficult. Beyond that, what we realized was that we now had a situation where we could repurpose digital assets. So what does that mean? Well, in that prototype piece that we created light cycles. I don't know how many of you have seen the film, or even the original film, but these digital motorcycles that are raced throughout this film are called light cycles, right? That's a core icon of the first film. So the notion was, if we visually developed an icon from the first film and we carried it forward into 2010, and we could show a studio how powerful and compelling those light cycles were, that there'd be value with that, and so on and so forth with the rest of the assets in the film. Another asset that we pitched to them and talked about was the notion of creating a completely photoreal digital human being. And that'll go back to that slide that I spoke about a couple years at the other TED conference. Was we had just been working on The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, and on that film, we kind of found the Holy Grail. We figured out how to do the thing that's the most difficult thing to do in computer graphics, which is to create a completely believable human being in the computer, right? And so we just finished that. Our idea for this was, because Jeff Bridges plays 2 key roles in the first film, he's the hero and the villain, the notion was that he could reprise those roles in this film. And the hero, who would now be, who was a man in the first movie, would now be about 60 years old, but his evil avatar inside this video game, this rogue program, the character called Clue, that was in Jeff Bridges' likeness, wouldn't have aged. So he'd still be about 30 years old. And so what we said was, we're going to have Jeff Bridges, now 60, play opposite himself at age 30. So that got a big wow factor. Of course, no one believed us that we could do that. And so the key was we had to bring in Jeff Bridges and show him the behind the scenes of Benjamin Button before the movie had been released, to show him, yes, we can make you young again. And it won't be animators interpreting your performance, but in fact, we've created a direct drive system whereby you can be the character, and anything you do, down to involuntary muscle reflexes in your face, will come across in digital you. So that kind of blew his mind. He loved that. So at this point, we started to realize that in doing this prototype, the digital assets that were created in that process could now feed the motion picture production pipeline. But beyond that, we started to look at this notion of extending the grid. Now, the grid is the game grid inside the Tron world, right? Because the whole thing takes place inside this video game environment, right? And the notion of extending the grid is now expanding out from single screen, right? And so now we get back into this notion of telling stories across multiple platforms. And because we now have a substantially digital movie, a movie that's 85, 90% computer generated, those assets are rich. Those assets have great value across time and space and a whole host of platforms. so that we can now speak to fans and scale a global community and talk to them across their various platforms to clue them into what's coming in the film and bring them into the world and then reward them with content over time across the devices. So because we don't have a lot of time, I'm going to blast through this next several slides, but you'll get an idea of the kinds of things that we're talking about. We believe that technology was going to enable the fan base and bring them together. And specifically, we saw mobile kind of sitting at the center of the franchise as one common thing that would transcend borders around the world and could bring all fans together wirelessly to interact with their content. So that was the power of mobile. The other thing is that within mobile, we believe that people would be able to share. And when I say mobile, it also includes tablets, iPads and so on and so forth, and use all the power of mobility. We could also use those things to connect people via the social networks that they use around the story world that they love, around Tron. Again, use all media, online and offline, television and internet, to draw fans together. Embrace the tablets, create a compelling interactive experience on an iPad or a tablet platform that's not necessarily the movie, but exploring backstory or additional mythology of the movie using the same digital assets. Augmented reality, to now bring the movie into the real world so that people can use their smartphones and devices to see their favorite characters and components of the movie now break out of the digital realm and come into our real world. I mean, these are all things that are possible now, need to be thought about. The same thing, in retail, the ability to bring things to life at the point of purchase. If you're buying, whether it's video games or merchandise or otherwise, but the ability to enact and enable content in those stores. Again, using the devices of these different platforms. The video game. So the assets in the movie are the assets in the video game. It's the same light cycles and light jets and so on and so forth and characters in the world all drops into the video game, so now it can be explored interactively. Again, during the design process and the prototyping of the movie, that's the stuff we're thinking about now. And then even as far as, we call it the digital red carpet, notions of like events, where digital characters in movies can't physically be there, but for those of us watching online or on television, you can see them. We can actually allow digital characters and things from the movie to be there now digitally and enable that. And so I'm out of time, but we're close. So the notion is for us was exploring this idea of storytelling across a broad platform. And we stumbled into it and began to find our way on Tron. Of course, we ended up bringing in writers and developing story and the stuff that has to happen. But in a way, we discovered this and now embrace this type of development during the story process on films that we make. But had we not been dealt that bad hand at the time, maybe not had come across it this way. So it's learning that we had to think about the development process not in the way that we were comfortable and used to. And I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much.